So, hello and welcome back yet again to Lewis Carroll's second Alice adventure through the Looking Glass, where it started off and I'm already feeling just as lost as I did in the first one, but I'm enjoying it just as much. Just because I'm a little bit lost doesn't mean I'm not enjoying the story. We met the Jabberwocky and Dinah's kittens. So Dinah, the kitten from the first story, is now a mama cat and being called the old cat, which I think is very rude. And yeah, Alice pushed her way through the mirror and is now in Reverso World, I guess. I wonder if that's attached to Wonderland or if it's supposed to be something completely different. So, we're just reading one chapter tonight because I'm a terrible, terrible person and I'm running behind, and this actually has to be up tonight. I usually try to get a day ahead on my reading, and it just hasn't been working lately. I've been really, really busy. I hope you're having a fantastic Memorial Day if you're watching this the day it goes live in the US on my time zone. If not, I hope your Memorial Day was fantastic. And if you don't celebrate Memorial Day because you live in a different country, I hope you just had a good day. You know, it's the unofficial start of summer, and to celebrate, I didn't do any barbecuing and I definitely didn't do any swimming, but I did put the rest of my garden in, or at least most of the rest. I haven't done much with flowers yet, but I think I have all the vegetables in. We had a frost last night, but I was looking at the 10-day forecast and I don't see any more frosts coming, crossing my fingers. I know it's funny to people who are watching this from the United States South, from down in any place lower than the 45th parallel, which I live above, but we regularly get frosts up until June, and I'm hoping I didn't put my plants in too soon. All of the hardy stuff that I put in, all of the brassicas, they're fine. They've been in the ground for a couple weeks now, and they've been absolutely fantastic, even with the frosts we've had. But I put in peppers and tomatoes and things like that today. We'll see. If they grow, that's great. If not, that's also fine. Not as great, but it's fine. Anyway, we're going to jump back in and see what Alice is doing, though. She's also in a garden. Somehow I get the feeling that her garden's going to be a little trippier than mine. So we're going to jump back into chapter 2 of Through the Looking Glass and Alice's Adventures There, and that is titled The Garden of Live Flowers. I should see the garden far better, said Alice to herself, if I could get to the top of that hill. And here's a path that leads straight to it. At least, no, it doesn't do that. After going a few yards along the path and turning several sharp corners, she said, but I suppose that it will at last. But how curiously it twists. It's more like a corkscrew than a path. Well, this turn goes to the hill, I suppose. No, it doesn't. This goes straight back to the house. Well, then, I'll try the other way. And so she did, wandering up and down and trying turn after turn, but always coming back to the house to do what she would. Indeed, once, when she had turned a corner rather more quickly than usual, she ran against it before she could even stop herself. It's no use talking about it, Alice said, looking up at the house and pretending that it was arguing with her. I'm not going in again yet. I know I should have to get through the looking glass again back into the old room, and that'll be an end to all my adventures. So resolutely turning her back upon the house, she set off once more down the path, determined to keep straight on till she got to the hill. For a few minutes, all went on well, and she was just saying, I really shall do it this time, when the path gave a sudden twist and shook itself, as she described it after, And the next moment she found herself actually walking in the door. "Oh, this is too bad," she cried. "I never saw such a house for getting in the way, never." However, there was the hill in full sight, so there was nothing to do but start again. This time she came upon a rather large flower bed with a border of daisies and a willow tree growing in the middle. "Oh, Tiger Lily," said Alice, addressing herself to the one that was waving gracefully in the wind, "I wish you could talk." "We can talk," said the Tiger Lily, "when there's anyone worth talking to." Alice was so astonished that she couldn't speak for a minute. It seemed to take her breath away. At length, as the Tiger Lily only went on waving about, Alice spoke again in a timid voice, almost a whisper. "And can all the flowers talk?" "As well as you can," said the Tiger Lily, "and a great deal louder." And we have a picture. "It isn't manners for us to begin, you know," said the Rose, "and I really was wondering when you would speak. Said I to myself, her face has got some sense in it, although it's not a clever one. Still, you're the right color, and that goes a long way." "I don't care about the color," Tiger Lily remarked. "If only her petals curled up a little more, she'd be all right." Alice didn't like being criticized, so she began asking questions. "Aren't you sometimes frightened at being planted out here with no one to take care of you?" "There's the tree in the middle," said the Rose. "What else is it good for?" "But what could it do, if any danger came?" Alice asked. "It could bark." "It says bow wow," cried a daisy. "That's why its branches are called boughs." "Didn't you know that?" said another daisy. And here they all began shouting together until the air seemed quite full of little shrill voices. "Silence, every one of you!" cried the Tiger Lily, waving itself passionately from side to side and trembling with excitement. "They know I can't get at them," it panted, bending its quivering head to Alice, "or they wouldn't dare do it." "Never mind," said Alice in a soothing tone, and stooping down to the daisies, who were just beginning again, she whispered, "If you don't hold your tongues, I'll pick you." There was silence in a moment, and several of the pink daisies turned white. "That's right," said the Tiger Lily. "The daisies are the worst of all. When one speaks, they all begin together, and it's enough to make one wither to hear the way they go on." "How is it you can all talk so nicely?" said Alice, hoping to get the Tiger Lily into a better temper by complimenting it. "I've been in many gardens before, but none of the flowers could talk." "Put your hand down and feel the ground," said the Tiger Lily. "Then you'll know why." Alice did. "It's very hard," she said, "but I don't see what that has to do with anything." "In most gardens," the Tiger Lily said, "they make the beds too soft, so that all the flowers are always asleep." This sounded like a very good reason, and Alice was quite pleased to hear about it. "I never thought of that before," she said. "It is my opinion that you never think at all," said the Rose. "I never saw anybody that looks stupider. said a violet, so suddenly that Alice quite jumped because it hadn't spoken before.
Hold your tongue, said the tiger lily, as if you ever saw anybody. You keep your head under the leaves and snore away there till you know no more what's going on in the world than if you were just a bud.
Are there any more people in the garden besides me? Said Alice, choosing not to notice the rose's latest remark. There's one flower in the garden that can move about like you, said the rose. I wonder how you do it.
You're always wondering, said the tiger lily.
But that other is more bushy than you are. Is she like me? Said Alice eagerly, for the thought crossed her mind. There's another little girl in the garden somewhere. Well, she has the same awkward shape as you, said the rose, but she's redder, and her petals are shorter, I think.
They're done up close, like a dahlia, said the tiger lily, not tumbled all around like yours.
But that's not your fault, said the rose. You've begun to fade, you know, and then one can't help one's petals getting a bit untidy. Alice didn't like this idea, not at all. So, to change the subject, she said, Does she ever come out here? I dare say you'll see her soon, said the rose. She's one of the kind that has 9 spikes, you know. Where does she wear them? Said Alice, with a bit of curiosity. Why, all around her head, of course, the rose replied. I was wondering, you hadn't got some too. I thought that it was the regular rule.
She's coming, cried the larkspur. I hear her footsteps thump thump along the gravel walk.
Alice looked around eagerly and found it was the Red Queen. She's grown a lot, was her first remark. And she had indeed. When Alice first found her in the ashes, she had been only 3 inches high, and here she was, half a head taller than Alice now. It's the fresh air that does it, said the rose. Wonderfully fine air it is out here. I think I'll go and meet her, said Alice. For though the flowers were interesting enough, she felt it would be far grander to have a talk with a real queen. You can't possibly do that, said the rose. I advise you to walk the other way. And we have a picture. This sounded like nonsense to Alice, so she said nothing but set off at once towards the Red Queen. To her surprise, she lost sight of her in a moment and found herself walking in at the front door yet again. A little provoked, she drew back, and after looking everywhere for the Queen, who she spied at last a long way off, she thought that she would try the plan this time of walking in the opposite direction. And it succeeded beautifully. She had not been walking a minute before she found herself face to face with the Red Queen and in full sight of the hill she had been so long aiming for. Where did you come from? Said the Red Queen. And where are you going? Look up, speak nicely, and don't twiddle your fingers all the time. Alice attended to all these directions and explained as well as she could that she had lost her way. I don't know what you mean by your way, said the Queen. All of the ways around here belong to me. But why did you come out here at all? She said in a slightly kinder tone. Curtsy while you're thinking what to say. It saves time. Alice wondered a little at this, but she was too much in awe of the Queen to disbelieve her. I'll try it when I go home, she thought to herself, the next time I'm a little late for dinner. "It is time for you to answer now," said the Queen, looking at her watch. "Open your mouth a little wider when you speak, and always say your Majesty."
"I only wanted to see what the garden was like, your Majesty."
"That's right," said the Queen, patting her on the head, which Alice did not like one bit. "Though when you say garden, I've seen gardens, compared with which this would be a wilderness." Alice didn't dare argue the point, but just went on speaking.
"And I thought I'd try to find my way to the top of that hill."
"When you say hill," the Queen interrupted, "I could show you hills in comparison with which you would call that a valley."
"No, I shouldn't,"
said Alice, surprised into contradicting her finally.
"A hill can't be a valley, you know. That would be nonsense."
The Red Queen shook her head. "You may call it nonsense if you like," she said, "but I've heard nonsense compared with which that would be as sensible as a dictionary." Alice curtsied again, since she was afraid from the Queen's tone that she had been a little offended, and they walked on in silence till they got to the top of the little hill. For a few minutes Alice stood without speaking, looking out in all directions over the country, and a most curious country it was. There were a number of tiny little brooks running straight across it from side to side, and the ground between was divided up into squares by a number of little green hedges that reached from brook to brook.
"I declare, it's marked out just like a large chessboard," said Alice at last. "There ought to be some men moving about somewhere, and so there are," she said in a tone of delight, and her heart began to beat quick with excitement as she went on. "It's a great, huge game of chess being played all over the world, if this is the world at all, you know. Oh, what fun it is! Oh, how I wish I was one of them. I wouldn't mind being a pawn if I could just join, though I would like to be a queen, but—"
And we have a chessboard. She glanced rather shyly at the real Queen as she said this, but her companion just smiled pleasantly and said, "That's easily managed. You can be the White Queen's pawn if you like, as Lily is too young to play, and you're in second square to begin with. When you get to the 8th square, you'll be a queen." Just at this moment, somehow or another, they both began to run. Alice never could quite make out, in thinking it over after, how it was that they began. All she remembers is that they were running hand in hand, and the Queen went so fast that it was all she could do to keep up with her, and still the Queen kept crying, "Faster! Faster!" But Alice felt she could not go faster, though she had no breath left to say that. The most curious part of the thing was that the trees and the other things around them never changed their places at all, however fast they went. They never seemed to pass anything. "I wonder if all the things move with us," thought poor puzzled Alice. And the Queen seemed to guess her thoughts, for she cried, "Faster! Don't try to talk." Not that Alice had any idea about doing that. She felt as if she would never be able to talk again, and she was getting so much out of breath, and still the Queen cried faster and dragged her along. Are we nearly there?" Alice managed to pant out at last. "Nearly there," the Queen repeated. "Why, we passed it 10 minutes ago. Faster!" And they ran on for a time in silence, with the wind whistling in Alice's ears and almost blowing her hair off her head, she thought. "Now! Now!" cried the Queen. "Faster!" And they went so fast that at last they seemed to skim through the air, hardly touching the ground with their feet, till suddenly, Just as Alice was getting quite exhausted, they stopped, and she found herself sitting on the ground, breathless and giddy. The Queen propped her up against a tree and kindly said, "You may rest a little now." Alice looked around her in great surprise.
"Why, I do believe we've been under this tree the whole time. Everything's just as it was."
"Of course it is," said the Queen. "What would you have it?"
"Well, in our country," said Alice, still panting a little, "you would generally get somewhere else if you ran very fast for a long time, as we just were doing."
"A slow sort of country," said the Queen. "Now here, you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that."
"I'd rather not try that, please," said Alice. "I'm quite content to stay here, only I'm very hot and thirsty."
"I know what you'd like," said the Queen good-naturedly, taking a little box out of her pocket. "Have a biscuit." Alice thought it would not be civil to say no, though it wasn't at all what she wanted. She took it and ate it as well as she could, and it was very, very dry, and she thought she had never been so nearly choked in her entire life. "Well, you are refreshing yourself," said the Queen. "I'll just take measurements." And she took a ribbon out of her pocket, marked in inches, and began measuring the ground and sticking little pegs in here and there. "At the end of 2 yards," she said, putting in a peg to mark the distance, "I shall give you your directions. Another biscuit?"
"No, thank you," said Alice. "One is quite enough."
"Is your thirst quenched?" said the Queen. Alice didn't know what to say to this, but luckily the Queen didn't wait for an answer, but went on. "At the end of 3 yards, I shall repeat them, for fear of your repeating them. At the end of 4, I shall say goodbye, and at the end of 5, I shall leave." She had gotten all her pegs put in by this time, and Alice looked on with great interest as she returned to the tree and began walking slowly down the row. At the 2-yard peg, she faced around and said, "A pawn goes 2 squares in its first move, you know. So you'll go very quickly through the 3rd square, by railway, I should think, and you'll find yourself in the 4th square in no time. Well, that square belongs to Tweedledum and Tweedledee. The 5th is mostly water. The 6th belongs to Humpty Dumpty, but you make no remark."
I didn't know I had to make one just then," said Alice.
"You should have said," the Queen went on in a tone of reproof, "it is extremely kind of you to tell me all this. However, we'll suppose that it was said. The 7th square is all forest. However, one of the knights will show you the way. And in the 8th square, we will be queens together. And after that, it's all feasting and fun." Alice got up, curtsied, and then sat again. At the next peg, the Queen turned again, and this time she said, "Speak in French when you can't think of the English for a thing. Turn out your toes as you walk, and remember who you are." She did not wait for Alice to curtsy this time, but walked on quickly to the next peg, where she turned for a moment to say goodbye, and then hurried on to the last. How it happened, Alice never knew, but exactly as she came to the last peg, she was gone. When she vanished into the air, or whether she ran into the woods, and she can run fast, thought Alice, there was no way of guessing. But when she was gone, and Alice began to remember that she was a pawn, and it would soon be time for her to make her move. And that is the end of chapter 2. So Alice Through the Looking Glass is a giant chess game? Okay. I like the talking flowers. I wish I were better at voices. I envy Aaron his ability to do so many voices and do them so distinctly. I do my best, but he's much better at it than I am. Hopefully he'll be reading some of the chapters in here, but it all depends on his work schedule. It looks like he's going to have a pretty busy week coming up ahead. Memorial Day today, and we're doing all of my version of Memorial Day, which is planting and just cooking regular food. But after that, he's going to be very, very busy, which means probably very, very tired. But if I can impose upon him, I will get him to read at least a couple chapters a week. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed that chapter. I really did. It made more sense than the first one to me, which is saying something because Lewis Carroll doesn't make a lot of sense, but I still like it. So thank you for listening. Please do hit the thumbs up on your way out. It does always make me smile, and I will see you next time.